Some of the highlights of my life have come from studying the Hague School and falling in love with their pictures. The paintings made me feel relaxed, my pulse dropped, there's a sense of quiet to them, life goes slower. It's just been forgotten 125 years ago that these paintings were so popular. Why doesn't anyone know about the Hague School anymore?
Nestled along Florida's northeastern coast lies St. Augustine, the nation's oldest city. Founded in 1565 by Spanish explorers, this settlement is a living monument to history, where cobblestone streets and centuries-old landmarks offer a glimpse into the past. From the Castillo de San Marcos to the Bridge of Lions, St. Augustine is a blend of old and new, a gateway to stories waiting to be discovered, stories lost to time, stories long forgotten. In the heart of this historic settlement stands the Leitner Museum. Once a luxurious hotel during the Gilded Age, this building now houses one of the most unique collections of art and history in the country. In a museum like this, even one man's personal collection can come to life, offering the public a chance to experience art in a way that would have otherwise never been possible. Personal treasures can be shared and remembered by the world. Among these treasures is an exhibit unlike any other, an entire floor dedicated to the 19th century Dutch art movement known as the Hague School.
Hallo, ik heet Donnie Robbins en ik woon in St. Augustine, Florida. We hebben een collectie van Haagse School schilderijen. Er is een tentoonstelling in het Leitner Museum. Hi, I'm Don Robbins. I'm the collector of the Hague School paintings here in St. Augustine. I have an exhibition at the Leitner Museum. I was actually a math professor at Flagler College prior to this, as well as the golf coach there, but this is now my new passion. It all began in 2001 on a visit to Europe with my wife, Liz. And I ended up going to the Mesdag Museum in The Hague. And as soon as I walked in, as my pulse lowered, I felt right at home with the Hague School paintings. And I knew something clicked with me at that moment, and that hasn't happened before. So let's talk about 19th century painting in the Netherlands. It began a school called the Dutch Romantic School from, let's say, 1800 to 1860. Because some of the artists from the Netherlands traveled to France, they were able to come across a new school called the Barbizon School, where the artists were heading outside and painting what they actually saw. The Dutch painters picked up on that and started doing the same thing in their country. So I always consider 1860 to 1870 a transition period from Barbizon to the Hague School. And then some of the original Hague School artists started to pass, and we call it the second generation of Hague School artists began. The very first time I was in the Mesdag Museum, the paintings made me feel relaxed. There's a sense of quiet to them. Life goes slower. I really enjoyed the fact that they portrayed fisher folk and farmers and laborers with such dignity, rather than only the wealthy patrons. I think the word for me is grounded. When I'm around Hague School paintings, I feel that way. It's almost as though I feel my place in the world. I kind of have the same philosophy as some of the artists that basically says life is transitory and the greater forces, the sky, the earth, the oceans go on. To me, that gives me a sense of calmness, knowing that there are greater forces than myself. This painting is by Josef Israels, a very important Hague School artist. The title is De Roker in Dutch, or The Smoker in English, and it was done in 1882. In 1861, he was still struggling, had not found his niche, and he decided to take a break and go to the closest beach, which was Zandvoort, and he decided to start painting the fishing community inside and outside their homes. Josef Israels became famous for his depictions of fishermen and other laborers as well. There's maybe great pride in what the fisherman has accomplished that day, and this is his first chance after maybe a long, hard day to take a break, warm his feet, have a smoke. But just the way he always depicted them as proud people, and it always had a big impact on me.
The reaction to the Hague School has been very positive because it's a different kind of art for people. They're used to seeing somebody painting a portrait to hang over a fireplace. And it's not customary for them to walk into an art gallery and see somebody painting a sheep walking into a barn. But it's really a nice view of the Netherlands in that period, 1860 through early 1900s. Most people have thought this was very entertaining and very enjoyable because they just painted what they saw. And there are some beautiful pieces up there. So we've had a very nice reaction to it, and a lot of people come here specifically to see that collection. So you're going to take the elevator to 3F, and you're going to see the art.
And back in the States, when we returned from our trip, I purchased some books about the Hague School and learned as much as I could, and then I decided to buy one. My first painting that I bought was on eBay, and I'd like to show you that painting actually and show you what happened. So I have that right here. Sold to me as a painting by Hendrik Willem Mesdag from the Mesdag Museum. I paid a small amount for it. There was an appraiser in St. Augustine that you could bring a couple items to. And I brought this, and after about a 10-minute review on the internet for the appraiser, he came back with an estimate of 40 to 60,000 for a painting that I paid less than 1,000 for on eBay. And I was thinking, wow, this is crazy how this just played out. However, it didn't quite work out like that. The value of this painting is not 40 to 60,000. The Hague School is not known well by people. It's a bit forgotten. So it was a learning experience for me, and quite a helpful one actually, because then I became very serious. If I was going to purchase another Hague School painting, I wanted to make sure it was real. So I spent a couple of years reading every book I could on the subject and had a much better idea before I purchased my next painting, which was at auction, and I had a pretty good idea of what I was buying at that point. Buying paintings at auction is a tricky business, especially in the beginning when you don't have the experience. Unfortunately, the Hague School paintings have been copied by many students. As much as 50% at times of the paintings that are sold at auction are not real. Not blaming the people that are selling them because they think it is. You have to know a lot before you buy at auction. You have to become your own expert. And of course you're bidding against someone else or a group of people. One thing that happened to me kind of early in my buying career is that I felt like I overpaid for a painting and felt some buyer's remorse. And that was a terrible feeling because buying a painting should be total joy. But having that buyer's remorse kind of kept me grounded, I guess, on how I can really do this and enjoy it. Just that moment, we've all been there, when you just kind of finally break word and like anything. Yeah. For some it's a drain, for some it's a... This is a painting by Willem Roelofs, and the title is Old Oak. Willem Roelofs was very important to the foundation of the Hague School. He was a Dutch painter, but he resided in Brussels, which, as they say, is halfway to Paris from Amsterdam. And Paris was the capital of the art world in the 19th century, so to be in Brussels was actually a better place to be artistically than it would be in Amsterdam and The Hague at that time. And he was able to find a new way of painting because the Barbizon school had begun in France when the painters started going outside into nature, painting what they saw, which was very different than the paintings that were done at that time, other than that, which were classical in nature. And that's what was popular at the Paris Salon. That was the most important art contest in the 19th century. And so before I actually put the book together, there's 70 paintings, I wanted to make sure they were all real before it was published. So I ended up taking a copy of the early book before it was published, which was just a book that I made right here on a printer. So I was thinking, like, how am I going to get this authenticated? And I wanted to get it authenticated in the Netherlands. So there's a very famous show similar to Antiques Roadshow in the USA called Tussen Kunst en Kitsch. It's very popular. It's on weekly and it's very popular. It's had a 30-year run at least. And for those 30 years, there's been one real expert on painting who always does the paintings. His name is Willem de Winter. And I'm thinking, wow, there's probably not a better person to have a look at this book than him.
Ik merk heel vaak dat mensen hun eigen paradijsje creëren. En dat doen ze met de dingen die ze mooi vinden en waar ze graag naar kijken. Ja. En die kunst.
So I ventured down to his house in Haarlem and knocked on his door. And he answered. And it was kind of interesting what happened next. So there was a man already in his building who was trying to sell him a painting by Louis Apol. The painting was on the floor. And Willem de Winter was kind of looking at it because he was thinking about purchasing it. And I could see immediately that there was a bit of a wave in the canvas. And so he ended up not buying the painting, and the gentleman left, and then he kind of looked at me, and I just kind of gave this motion. And he was like, oh yes, you saw it too. So I asked him if he wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to look through this book and see if he thought that all these paintings were authentic. And he did. It did not take long, and he stopped at one painting about 2/3 of the way through and said, I'm kind of not sure about this one. And then he looked through the rest of them and he was happy with all the rest. So he basically authenticated all but one, which is not in the book. Then I felt like, okay, I'm ready to publish the book. At least I know all the paintings inside are real. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to give Willem de Winter a book in Amsterdam about a year and a half after it was published. And I know now that it sits on a shelf in his library in his house, and it makes me very happy. In the very beginning, I didn't really have a favorite, but once I've lived with the paintings for a number of years, a couple have risen to the top, and that would be Anton Mauve and Jan Hendrik Weizenbroek. And I think there's 7 or 8 Mauves in the exhibition, and I think 4 or 5 Weizenbroeks, so you can see that I enjoy those paintings. At home, I tend to look at one of either a Mauve or a Weizenbroek, and I find them very meditative. After sometimes 20, 30 minutes goes by, and I really don't even remember what I was thinking about. And you know, that's kind of a form of meditation, which is very helpful. And so I do that actually quite often. So those are the paintings that I interact with the most in my house. I was always a fan of Jan Hendrik Weizenbroek, one of the finest Hague School artists, and I tried to buy a painting by him for, I would say, 15 years. And I bid many, many times at auction, and I was the underbidder. Someone always just overbid me, and sometimes by a lot. And so finally was successful. I'm so glad that I was, because I find his paintings spectacular. This painting is by Jan Hendrik Weizenbroek. One thing I really appreciate about the Dutch is their appreciation for the ordinary. And Jan Hendrik Weizenbroek also had that. So he's just taken a simple walk on the beach and decides, I'm going to paint a watercolor of this scene. Jan Hendrik Wijzenbroek is very difficult to buy at auction. He's very popular. And so when this came for sale, I immediately thought, one, it could be the cover of the book. I absolutely lose myself in Wijzenbroek paintings. He's known as the poet of the Hague School. And so I'll just start staring at this painting and 20, 30 minutes will go by and I really haven't thought about anything. It's just kind of a meditative state. It's a very calming influence to be able to view a painting such as this in my eyes. There were a few turning points that come to mind right away. The first, of course, being buying the fraudulent painting from eBay and realizing it was fake, and all that studying I did for a couple of years to try to make sure that I wouldn't buy that again. You know, you can buy from dealers or you can buy from auction, and buying from auction you have to be kind of more your own expert. So buying at auction was another turning point. The third one for me came about somewhat unexpectedly because I was trying to buy an Anton Malva from an auction house in Mexico City, and it was a very important painting. It had been in the Met, and it was one of a series of 4 of the seasons, and it was Delenta. And I knew it was kind of an important painting by Anton Malva. So then I started maybe thinking about, maybe I should try to do a real collection of serious Hague School paintings. And, you know, I think, and that's what I did. This painting by Anton Malva was done as a series of 4 of the 4 seasons. The title of this is Spring, or De Lente in Dutch. And it depicts a sheep and a shepherd, and this is probably Den Haag. Anton Malva is famous for his sheep paintings. Everyone seemed to like them, and the demand became so great. A price differential occurred between his sheep paintings. The sheep coming towards you would command a higher price than the sheep going away. When this painting was done by Malva and he showed it to the shepherd would be able to recognize each individual sheep in the painting. Another thing that's pretty exciting about this painting was its provenance. Because when I decided to potentially purchase this painting, it came from an auction house in Mexico City. And it was a new auction house that didn't really have a record behind it. I did a pretty big search on Spring. It was not too hard to find that this painting was originally owned by George Saney, the president of Metropolitan Bank of New York. And George Saney ran into some difficulties as the president, and he developed some debt. And the government stepped in and said, to satisfy some of your debt, we would like you to donate 12 paintings to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Eventually, it was deaccessioned from the Met, and then it's kind of got lost. It was sold, as I said, at the auction house in Mexico City, but I cannot find the information between it was when it's deaccessioned and how it got to the auction house in Mexico City. When I asked the people after I purchased it to give me information on the person who the previous owner, they were not forthcoming with that information. It's like, okay, normally they do try to give you that at an auction house, but so I asked the shipper when I had it shipped, what do you think the problem was? And he said that they will not normally give that information out because many of the paintings that move through Mexico are involved in the drug trade as collateral. This painting is watercolor by Anton Malva, and the title is Wood Sale. It was done in December of 1881. It was very important to me, that actual date, because Anton Malva was the only teacher Vincent van Gogh ever had, and he was working with him in December 1881. And there's much material in the letters that Vincent wrote to his brother Theo about that experience. Actually, when they first got together, Vincent van Gogh didn't even actually know how to hold a paintbrush. What Malva thought would be helpful for Vincent at this time was to be able to sell a painting. Vincent was poor. His only money was coming from a stipend from his brother from his job. Malva was probably walking through the woods in The Hague and actually saw this. And then he also made a bigger watercolor of this in December 1881 that went directly to Hendrik Willem Mesdag, and it's still today in the Mesdag Museum in Den Haag. After Anton Malva finished his work and Van Gogh was able to see how it was painted. He was able to create 3 watercolors of his own in the next 2 years. It was interesting what happened, though, between the two of those. Vincent was difficult to work with, and Anton Mauve at this time is preparing his own big work for the Paris Salon in 1882. So he was quite busy with his own things. But Vincent required a lot of attention, and they started to have some issues, but the real issue was when Vincent ended up living with a prostitute that was pregnant with and also had a young child. They got in a big fight, and Mauve, I think he was really angry at the time, and I'm sure he didn't mean this, but he said that Vincent had a vicious character, and once Vincent heard that, he basically walked away and kind of never looked back. They never worked together again, although Vincent spoke of Mauve for the rest of his life in the letters to his brother, how important it was that he had that time. This painting by Anton Mauve, titled Interlude, is a bit unusual for Mauve's work because it's an interior scene. This particular painting kind of means a lot to me for what happened. One day I was at the Van Gogh Museum. They had the potato eaters, and off to the side there was a study of the potato eaters. And as soon as I saw the study, I actually gasped because immediately I saw this. Because in the study, and you can see it now on the screen, there's a man reading a newspaper in the exact same position as this gentleman is here. And of course, Van Gogh had seen all of Mauve's paintings, so you have to presume that he would have seen this painting first before he even attempted potato eaters. And so it's very unusual to have a man reading a newspaper at this time depicted in a painting. So immediately I was like, wow, I can see kind of an inspiration beginning here between this painting and the potato eaters, or at least the study. And then you notice that this clock and then this light and then the silverware holder are in the same positions as you see. Really, it appears to be an inspiration for potato eaters. That Van Gogh looked at this first, saw it, and said, I'm going to at least start painting the man with the newspaper in the same position, but I think you can all see the connection. So the most famous artist of the Hague School, I think by price you'd have to say Anton Mauve. One of his paintings sold in today's dollars for about $1.5 million at auction in 1906. That has changed though over time. Hendrik Mesdag's paintings have always been somewhat valuable, but his paintings now could go to 100,000, 6 figures. So I think that he, in a general sense, is on the high end now, and the rest of the Hague School artists have dropped below that level. This painting is done by Hendrik Willem Mesdag, a very important painter of the Hague School. In the very beginning, when the Hague School was still at its infancy, Hendrik Mesdag was able to produce a painting in 1870, and he took it to the Paris Salon, which is incredible that he was able to win a gold medal, which he did. He had only been painting for 4 years at this point. He was a banker from Groningen in the Netherlands, and he was married to Sientje. Very important that he was married to Sientje too, because it was Sientje's inheritance from her father which allowed them to leave banking and to try painting. And he traveled to Brussels and was taught by Willem Roelofs, who you've seen earlier, and he worked with him for about a year. But by 1870, he was out painting on his own, and he painted that seascape, which won a gold medal, and everything changed. This particular painting by Hendrik Mesdag, a watercolor, is done in Scheveningen, which is the beach town closest to Den Haag. In World War II, the Dutch police were trying to figure out who was Dutch and who was German, and this is the town that they made them say out loud, because it's very difficult to say. It's a Dutch word, Scheveningen, that German people weren't able to pronounce it correctly, and they were found out immediately. This painting by Sientje Mesdag, the title is Scheveningen Dunes, and this is basically what she saw when she looked towards the North Sea. Sientje Mesdag, as a female, didn't have the rights that men had in 1870 Netherlands, or 1870 anywhere basically. So she was part of a feminist movement for well, all women in the Netherlands. They had a lot of exhibitions in the 1870s and 1880s. So she would bring her painting supplies and paint, and people would recognize, oh wow, women can paint too. Sintje married Hendrik Mesdag, and both of them decided at an early age to be just artists and to devote their life to art. At the end of their lives, their house went to the Netherlands as a museum, and that's the museum that influenced me so much, the Mesdag Museum, when I first visited in 2001. The Hague School has been forgotten. Even when you buy paintings at auction and you expect the auction houses to know about what they're selling, even those folks really don't know the individual Hague School artists. People say that I've talked to about this issue, why doesn't anyone know about the Hague School anymore? It was because of World War I and II coming right after. World War I, when it came, it was kind of the end of the Hague School, because the Hague School's heyday ended, let's say, 1890, when some of them started dying. But then, let's say, 1910 to, let's say, 1914 or so, when the war began, it was second generation of Hague School, and they were quite popular as well and doing quite well, but the war did stop that. And then because of the Second World War coming somewhat shortly after the First World War, that's what really made the Hague School forgotten. There's only been a couple exhibitions in America, so I'm hoping this exhibition kind of helps stimulate people remembering and appreciating the Hague School like they used to.
So how did the idea to exhibit the collection at the Library Museum start?
I think it all began because we had a new director at the Leitner Museum. My wife and I became friendly with him and invited him to the house. We gave him a tour of the house and all the paintings inside the house. And then when we had put the book together, we asked David Bognall, the director, to write the foreword for the book. And he did. And then at a later time, when the book was out, he came to me and asked if I would like to have an exhibition in his museum, and of course I jumped at the opportunity. I thought those can be tragic, having just all empty walls, because I'm so used to it, but the museum's so close, and I go there and give tours at least a few times a week, so when I go over to the museum into the exhibition, now I feel like I'm at home there. This painting is by Paul Gabriel, Sunset in Holland, and it is basically what Paul Gabriel is famous for. He's famous for solitary windmills in a polar landscape. He's also known as the colorist of the Hague School. This painting I loved from the very beginning, but one day it really meant a lot more to me when I found this out. I was looking through a book, and all of a sudden I came to the same windmill. Because normally when you see a windmill, you're not exactly sure where it is, at least I wasn't. So then I saw it and it was exactly the same, and you can see the picture now yourself. And it was a very important painting by Piet Mondrian, the famous Piet Mondrian. And they consider it a very important piece because it's known as a transition piece for Piet Mondrian. The yellow, blue, and red paintings, squares that sell for 40, 50 million at auction. That's where he ended up, but he didn't start there. They look at this piece that he did in 1903 as the first time he started delving into the abstraction. So when I made the connection between Piet Mondrian and Paul Gabriel had painted the same windmill, I was in Amsterdam, I decided to go ride my bike to the mill, and it was a 45-minute journey. Lovely, it's so nice to ride a bike in the Netherlands. So I got to the mill, and I wanted to find the exact same spot that they painted at. And it looked exactly like it did 100 and some years ago. And then so I found my position to photograph the windmill, and I was photographing, and then all of a sudden I heard a loud pow, I mean super loud. And I looked, to my left, and my bike had been hit pretty hard by a car kind of speeding by. So the car stopped and kind of backed up to where I was, And the lady said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I was looking at you, not at not at the road or on the other side of the road so I hit your bike, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "Well, let me see and then all of a sudden she just took off. And I was like, whoa, kind of like, why'd you stop? But my bike was not in great shape. The handlebars were totally like this. And my seat was gone. And actually my bell I never even found. But I had to get back, so I was able to stand on the bike, not sit, and kind of hold the handlebars really kind of strangely. And it was a long 45-minute ride back home. But right when I get back to just almost in Amsterdam, there was a bike shop, and I just kind of pulled in there. And bike shops are so great in the Netherlands. In, let's say, 20, 30 minutes, it was like I had a brand new bike again. So.
Great salute. Yeah, but that needs to be in there.
There is an incredible price differential between the paintings of, say, Vincent van Gogh or even Piet Mondrian compared to the Hague School artists. There's a variety of reasons, I think. The ones that come to my mind first is that Van Gogh started painting in a way that was totally different than anyone else had been painting at that time. And the Hague School artists stuck together as kind of a school, and so they all had similar techniques, and they might have painted different things, boats or sheep or landscapes, but you see a Van Gogh, you recognize it, it's different than anything you've ever seen before. And it's kind of the same thing happened with Piet Mondrian, where he started kind of as Hague School artist, and then he developed his own method to abstraction, and now you see his red, yellow, blue paintings at the highest level because it's something new and different. It's funny, everyone always complains about their modern society. Like the Hague School artists complained it was too modern back then, you know, from 50 years earlier. It's like, that's always a complaint. So I feel like it's similar times, and also because of the information age where things are traveling so fast, it may give people a chance to slow it down and find the peace that I've been able to find in these paintings. It gives you a time to take a break from speed of modern society. 125 years ago that these paintings were so popular and Americans just fell in love with them. I've always been curious to see if that's still the case today. And the response I've gotten from this exhibition so far has been very positive, and a lot of people don't know anything about these paintings. So I guess what I'm hoping for is, one, they enjoy them, and two, that they learn about it and kind of recognize Hague School paintings in their future. There is hope that this exhibition will travel, but it's a little hard to predict in the future what will happen. I still have the passion for the Hague School, and I'll keep researching and certainly viewing all the auctions and so forth, but it's really hard to say about future exhibitions. I just think that I would say that I hope there are some. People have said, well, why don't you buy more paintings to fill your walls now? And I'm like, well, because those paintings are coming back and there will be no space. It's definitely, when you walk into the house, it feels cold, not warm now. It feels dark and stark and I guess I love to live with paintings. I really needed some help before I published this book. I've told you the story about where I had all the paintings authenticated, but all the writing I needed to make sure was correct. And I really didn't know who to contact. So one of my friends from America, her mom, who lives in the Netherlands, knew a friend that turned later in her life to an art historian. So when I was in Amsterdam, I just called her up and asked if I could show her the book that I was working on. I went to her house. We spent about an hour together just going through the pages. And after that, I said goodbye, and she said goodbye, and I thought that was kind of the end of it. But then later on that night, I got a text, I think I was in bed, and she said, if you'd like, I could take a closer look at your writing. I was like, yes, exactly what I was looking for. So Immediately, I basically got dressed and dropped the book off through a little slot in the door so she could get it whenever she wanted to. And then I didn't hear anything for literally like 3 or 4 months. And I just figured, well, maybe just kind of nothing happened. And then I got an email and it was like 6 or 8 pages long. I could not believe the time she spent trying to verify every single thing I said. And she did find some things. But once she went through it so carefully and I made the changes, I really felt so much better because I knew then that I was writing something that was truthful and has been verified. I think I look at myself as an authority on what's a Hague School real painting and what's not, what's authentic. You know, I make that judgment all the time on paintings that are for sale. And I can usually tell by the price that they sold for that I had it right. I have not met another person that is so passionate about this school as I. I know that they must exist, and I totally look forward to speaking with them. I really just focused on it, fell in love with it, and kind of became obsessed with it. So the Hague School has been forgotten. I'm thinking that people loved the Hague School back when late 1800s, early 1900s, and why wouldn't they love it today? They can still understand the pictures. I hope, just an awareness, so they don't know about it. And then once they see the pictures, I think that they will fall in love with it again. As we know, these Hague School paintings were very popular with artists also. That's why so many traveled to the Netherlands to learn and paint in the same style. So there's no reason why that couldn't occur today. We still have landscape and people and beaches and townscapes, and you know, things evolve and then people do kind of recycle things. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there was a rebirth of people painting in this style as well. For me, the Hague School just happened immediately, just the way it makes me feel. It makes me feel calm, safe, grounded, and that's never left me. Even from that first time in 2001, now when I'm in a room of Hague School paintings, I feel the same way. It kind of slows everything down. The silence of the paintings, I really connect with that. I'm really moved by art. I didn't know that really was the case until I walked into the Mesdag Museum that day. And art is such a big part of my life now. So, you know, I was a math professor and now all I do is think about art. And plus you learn so much. Because of this, I've learned Dutch, and I've spent a lot of time in the Netherlands and went to classes with people from all over the world. And some of the highlights of my life have come from studying the Hague School and falling in love with their pictures. To all the viewers, I very much appreciate you and all the people that came to the exhibition and have developed a further awareness of the Hague School. That was my ultimate goal, and I hope you enjoy these paintings as much as I do. And thank you for your time. Hartelijk dank voor je tijd vandaag. Ik hoop dat je deze Hague School schilderijen mooi vindt. Het is mijn plezier te delen mijn gedachten met jou. Tot de volgende keer. Donnie.
you happy with that?
Yeah.
All right.
Wait.
That's it.
That's a wrap!
A total wrap.
Boom! Boom!